I thought I was simply sitting at a family dinner surrounded by people I had known for 7 years, watching steam rise from a casserole dish I had spent 3 hours making from scratch. I had no idea that the woman at the head of the table was about to detonate something that would obliterate every certainty I had ever held about my marriage, my home, and my own worth. "Tom's a real man," Dorothy announced to no one and everyone at once, her voice carrying that particular brand of sweetness that curdles the moment it lands. "He feeds that one and pays all the bills." That one. She did not look at me when she said it. She did not have to. Every pair of eyes at the table did the looking for her, sliding toward me for just a fraction of a second, then sliding away as if prolonged contact with my humiliation might be contagious. I sat very still, my fork suspended halfway between my plate and my mouth, and I thought, this is it. This is the moment I had been dismissing, excusing, rationalizing for the better part of 3 years. This was the moment I finally understood that Dorothy had never made a single mistake where I was concerned. Every slight had been intentional. Every word had been a brick in a wall she had been building long before I ever moved in. My name is Clara. I am 34 years old, and for the last 7 years I have been married to a man named Tom Halstead, who is, by every outward measure, a good man. He opens doors. He remembers birthdays. He apologizes first after arguments, even when he is not wrong, because he was raised to believe that peace is more valuable than pride. That is what his mother taught him, and it is also, I came to understand far too late, the single most effective weapon Dorothy Halstead ever forged. A son so committed to keeping the peace that he would sacrifice anyone and anything to maintain it, including me. We had met at a graduate school mixer, the kind of event nobody actually wants to attend, but everyone shows up to anyway, drawn by the twin forces of social obligation and free wine. Tom had been standing near the window with a glass of red in one hand and a look of mild, amused suffering on his face, and I had walked over because he looked exactly the way I felt. We talked for 4 hours. By the end of the semester, we were inseparable, and by the time I finished my master's degree in urban planning, we had already started talking about what came next as though it were obvious, because it was, or so I believed. We married in the spring, in a small ceremony at the botanical garden where my grandmother used to take me when I was a child. My grandmother, Nora, had passed away 2 years before the wedding, leaving me the house she had owned for 40 years. A pale yellow Victorian on Aldermore Street, with wide front steps and original hardwood floors and a garden that bloomed every April as if it were performing. The house was mine outright. No mortgage, left to me in a will that was legally airtight because my grandmother had been many things, but careless was not one of them. I had grown up in that house during summers and long weekends. The smell of it, lemon soap and old wood and something faintly floral that I had never been able to name, was the smell of safety to me. When Tom moved in after the wedding, I thought, here is everything: the house, the man, the life. What more could I possibly need? Dorothy had smiled at the wedding. She had held my hands and said, "Welcome to the family, sweetheart." And I had believed every syllable of it because I wanted to, because I needed to, and because the alternative, that the woman whose son I was marrying had already begun calculating what I was worth, was too bleak to consider. The first years were uncomplicated enough. Dorothy lived 40 minutes away in the house where Tom had grown up, a tidy colonial with an American flag on the porch and a bowl of cellophane-wrapped candies on the coffee table that I suspected had been there since the early 90s. She called Tom every Sunday at noon, a call that lasted exactly 45 minutes regardless of what else was happening, and she visited twice a month, always announced, always bearing food I hadn't asked for, always leaving behind the faint impression of having assessed every room and found it wanting. She never said anything directly unpleasant to me in those early years. She was too skilled for that. What she did instead was simply erase me from her sentences. She would call and ask Tom what he had been up to, and he would say, "Clara and I went to that new restaurant on 5th." And Dorothy would say, "Oh, that sounds lovely. Did you enjoy the food?" Not we, not you two, just you. A grammatical sleight of hand so small that pointing it out would make me look paranoid. I started keeping a mental ledger of these erasures. The way she would ask Tom what he wanted for his birthday dinner and then look past me when I suggested restaurants. The way she would describe our house to her friends as Tommy's place. The way she unfailingly referred to me in the third person as that one. Always with a particular emphasis, an invisible quotation mark around the phrase, as if that one were a category of being rather than a name. I told myself it was generational. I told myself she was old-fashioned, that she had simply raised a son in a world that no longer existed, that her language was a museum piece rather than a weapon. Tom, when I mentioned it, would rub the back of his neck and say, "She doesn't mean anything by it, babe. That's just how she talks." And I would nod, because I loved him, and because I could not yet imagine that his inability to correct his mother was anything other than harmless weakness. The first real tremor came 18 months ago. I had just received a significant promotion at my firm, Senior Project Manager, a title I had worked toward for 5 years, with a salary increase that moved me decisively into 6 figures. I was proud in a way that felt almost physical, the kind of pride that sits warm and solid in your chest. Tom took me to dinner to celebrate, and it was a beautiful evening, the kind we had not had in a while. Candlelight and good wine and conversation that felt genuinely easy, uncluttered by the low-grade stress that had begun to accumulate in our home like sediment. I remember thinking, as we walked back to the car with his arm around my shoulders, that things were good, that we were good. The following weekend, Dorothy came for Sunday dinner. I had cooked roast chicken, roasted vegetables, a lemon tart that had required 3 separate attempts before the crust came out right. Dorothy sat at my kitchen table, in my kitchen, in my house, and asked me, quite pleasantly, how much I was making now. I was so startled by the directness of the question that I answered honestly, more or less. Not the exact number, but enough. She nodded slowly, the way she always nodded when she was filing information away rather than responding to it. "That's wonderful," she said. "Tom works so hard. It's good that you're able to contribute a little." A little. I was earning more than Tom at that point, a fact that both of us knew and neither of us had ever turned into a competition, because that was not the kind of marriage we had, or so I had believed. Something shifted in Dorothy's manner after that dinner, though I could not have described the shift precisely. It was more atmospheric than concrete, the way a room feels different when someone has moved something a fraction of an inch. She started asking questions, not aggressive questions, not accusatory ones, small, conversational, apparently innocuous questions about the house. How much was the property tax? Had I thought about updating the kitchen? Did I have a mortgage? Or was it fully paid off? I answered them, because refusing to answer felt rude, and because I still could not make myself believe that this woman, who had held my hands at my wedding and said welcome to the family, was mapping the boundaries of something she intended to take. Tom started coming home later, not dramatically later, 20 minutes, half an hour, but consistently, reliably later, in a way that had a quality of pattern, rather than coincidence. When I asked if everything was okay at work, he said yes, everything was fine, and smiled at me in a way that stopped just short of his eyes. Twice I walked into the room while he was on the phone, and he shifted his body away from me slightly, the smallest possible repositioning, hardly worth noticing, before finishing the call. Both times, when I asked who he had been talking to, he said, "Mom," and then changed the subject. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself that marriages went through phases, that distance was not the same as betrayal, that the suspicious feeling crawling around the base of my skull was anxiety, not instinct. I told myself this with some conviction, and I almost believed it. Almost. The dinner at which Dorothy made her announcement, "Tom's a real man, he feeds that one and pays all the bills," was a gathering of 7 people. Tom and me, Dorothy, Tom's Aunt Rosemary, 2 of Dorothy's friends from her church group, whose names I had never properly retained, and Tom's cousin Brian, who had the look of a man who already knew something and was deeply relieved not to be asked about it. The remark landed the way a plate lands when it falls from a height. A sharp, comprehensive sound followed by a silence that feels louder than anything that preceded it. Brian stared at his food. Rosemary cleared her throat. Dorothy reached for the breadbasket with the unhurried ease of someone who had not just said anything remarkable at all. Tom looked at me. I looked at him. The moment lasted approximately 3 seconds, but it had the density of something much longer. The kind of pause you can feel in your back teeth, in the hollow of your sternum. He opened his mouth. I watched him, because I had been watching him for 18 months, because I had been waiting, with a patience I had not known I possessed, for the moment he would finally say something. "Mom," he said, and then nothing else. Just that one word, exhaled rather than spoken, and then he picked up his fork. I looked at my plate. The roast chicken I had brought was getting cold. I drove home that night with both hands on the wheel and nothing at all in my mind, which is what happens to me when my mind is too full to process. Tom sat in the passenger seat and said, "She didn't mean it the way it sounded." And I said, "How did she mean it?" And he was quiet for the rest of the drive. The streetlights passed overhead in even, rhythmic intervals, and I counted them, and I thought about the house. My grandmother's house. My house. And I thought about the property tax question, and the kitchen question, and the mortgage question, and a cold, deliberate understanding began to assemble itself in the back of my mind like a machine that has been waiting for its parts to arrive. 3 days after the dinner, I came home from work early. A meeting had been canceled, and I had a headache that was blossoming into something structural, the kind that settles behind one eye and refuses to negotiate. The house was quiet in the particular way it gets on weekday afternoons, holding the sounds of a neighborhood going about its business. A lawn mower 2 streets over, a dog barking once and then stopping, the refrigerator cycling on with its low, familiar hum. I set my bag down in the hall, filled a glass of water, and went to the living room to sit in the armchair by the window, the one that gets the afternoon light, the one that had been my grandmother's before it was mine. Tom's laptop was open on the coffee table. I would not have looked at it if the screen had been dark, but it wasn't. It was lit, and it was showing something. A document. Text dense, formatted like a legal form, and the words at the top of the page stopped me before I had consciously decided to stop. Property transfer agreement, Aldermore Street. My address, my grandmother's house. My name, in a field labeled current title holder, and next to it, in a field that should have been blank, or should at the very least have been mine, a name I did not expect, typed in the same clean font as everything else on the page, as though it were merely administrative, merely procedural, merely a detail. Dorothy Elaine Halstead. I did not move for a very long time. I stood in the middle of my living room in the afternoon light that had always made that room feel like something worth coming home to, and I read the document on Tom's laptop the way you read something when your brain is refusing full comprehension, word by word, slowly, as if the individual pieces might somehow fail to add up to what they so clearly added up to. The document was 3 pages long. It was dated 6 weeks ago. In the signature block at the bottom of the first page, there was a line for my name, Clara Ann Halstead, current owner. And the line was not blank. Someone had typed my name there too. Not signed it, typed it. As though typing were the same as consent, as though a name in a form field constituted agreement, as though I had authorized this transfer of my grandmother's house to my mother-in-law in some moment I had simply forgotten to remember. My hands began to tremble. It started in my fingers and moved up through my wrists and into my forearms, a fine, continuous shaking that I could not stop and did not try to. My pulse was in my ears. The room did not tilt exactly, but something in my spatial orientation shifted. The armchair looked farther away than it was. The walls seemed to have moved a fraction of an inch closer. I thought, very clearly, in a voice that was my own, but somehow removed from me, he helped her make this. That was the thing. Not just that Dorothy wanted my house. I could have constructed a scenario in which that was pure, uncomplicated avarice from a woman I had never trusted anyway. But the document was on Tom's laptop. It had been prepared on Tom's laptop, or opened on Tom's laptop, or saved to Tom's laptop. And those three options collapsed into a single devastating conclusion, with the finality of a door being locked from the outside. I took my phone out of my pocket. My hands were still shaking. I photographed every page of the document, all 3 pages, twice each, from 2 different angles. And then I stepped back from the table and went to the kitchen and stood at the sink and ran cold water over my wrists, the way my grandmother had taught me to do when I was a child, and the world felt like too much. The cold helped. It did not fix anything, but it gave my nervous system something to respond to other than betrayal, and that was enough for the moment. Tom came home at 6:17. I know the precise time because I was sitting in the kitchen with a cup of tea I had not touched, watching the clock on the microwave, waiting. I had considered many different versions of this conversation in the 2 hours I had spent sitting there. I had considered crying. I had considered screaming. I had considered saying nothing at all and calling a lawyer first. What I actually did when he walked in and set his keys on the hook by the door and said, "Hey, something smells good. Did you cook?" was say, very quietly, "Sit down, Tom." He turned to look at me. Something moved across his face. Not guilt, exactly, not yet. More like recognition. The recognition of a person who has been bracing for a collision and has just registered the first sound of impact. He sat down across from me at the kitchen table. The overhead light made the shadows under his eyes look deep and permanent. I placed my phone on the table between us, screen up, showing the photograph of the first page of the property transfer agreement, and I watched him look at it. He did not deny it. That was the first thing that told me how deep this went. Not that he had done it, but that he did not even try to pretend he hadn't. He looked at the phone for a long moment, and then he looked at me. And what I saw in his face was not the expression of a man who has been caught doing something wrong. It was the expression of a man who has been relieved of a weight he was tired of carrying. "I was going to tell you," he said. I said nothing. She asked me to help her put the paperwork together. She said she just wanted to understand the process, that she wasn't going to push anything, that it was just in case. He stopped. He ran a hand through his hair. "Clara, she's my mother." "She's your mother," I repeated. The words tasted like something left out too long. "She put your wife's name on a property transfer document without your wife's knowledge, and she's your mother." He looked at the table. He had a habit of doing that, looking at the table when he did not want to look at me. And in that moment, I had a sudden, vivid memory of every time I had watched him do it and told myself it was just how he processed things, that it was not avoidance, that it was not cowardice, dressed in the clothing of temperament. "I didn't think she was going to actually file anything," he said. "It was just, she was worried about what happens if what?" He was quiet. "If something happened to us." The kitchen hummed around me. "She's been planning this since she found out how much I make," I said. He did not answer, which was its own answer, the most complete and damning one he could have given. I stood up. I did not slam my chair back, did not raise my voice. What I did instead was pick up my phone and my keys and my jacket from the hook by the back door, and I said, "I'm going to see my father," and I left. My father, James, lives 12 minutes from Aldermore Street in a small bungalow he has occupied since my mother left 17 years ago. He is 61 years old and has the manner of a man who has seen enough of the world to be startled by very little of it. When I arrived at his door at 8 o'clock in the evening, with my eyes dry but my hands still shaking, he took one look at me and said, "Kitchen," and put the kettle on. I showed him the photographs. He read them twice, slowly, with a total, unhurried attention that I had envied my entire life. When he finished, he set the phone down. "That signature field," he said. "Your name is typed, not signed." "Yes." "That means the document isn't executed. It's a draft." "Yes." He looked at me. "But someone was going to ask you to sign it at some point." "Yes," I said. "That's what I think." He nodded slowly. "Okay, I know someone. You'll call her first thing tomorrow." Her name was Patricia Voss. She was an estate attorney who had handled the transfer of my grandmother's house into my name after Nora died, and she remembered both me and the property. When I called her the following morning, she listened to everything without interrupting, and when I finished, she said, "Send me the photographs," and then, "Don't sign anything. Don't respond to anything in writing without calling me first. And Clara, change the passwords on any shared accounts tonight." I did not sleep that night. I lay in the guest room and went through everything, not just the document, but the whole architecture of the past 18 months. The property tax questions, the kitchen questions. Brian studied avoidance at the dinner table, Tom coming home late, phone angled away, and the dinner itself, Dorothy's voice carrying its easy, practiced poison across a table full of people. Tom's a real man. He feeds that one and pays all the bills. She had not been boasting about her son. She had been announcing a position. She had been telling everyone present, and telling me, that in her accounting of this marriage, I was a liability, a dependent, a managed expense. She had been laying the groundwork for a story in which taking my house was not theft but correction, not cruelty but justice. I saw the whole of it now, assembled and complete, and the clarity of it was almost worse than the confusion had been. The confrontation I had been preparing for happened on a Saturday. I had asked Dorothy to come to the house, framing it as a lunch. She arrived at noon in a pale blue cardigan and the particular expression she wore when she was feeling magnanimous. Chin slightly lifted, smile slightly ahead of the eyes. Tom was there too. I had asked him to be there because I wanted him to hear this. Dorothy sat down at the kitchen table. I placed my phone on the table and said, "I'd like to talk about this," and showed her the photograph of the property transfer agreement. She looked at it for a long time. Then she looked up at me with an expression of such practiced innocence that under other circumstances I might have admired it. "Sweetheart," she said, "that's just something Tom and I were looking into for the family's protection. You understand, with property values being what they are." "My name is on that document," I said, "in a signature field. I did not put it there. I did not authorize anyone to put it there." She smiled. It was the smile she used when she thought I was being emotional. Patient, slightly weary, the smile of a reasonable person managing an unreasonable one. "You're getting upset over nothing. Nothing was ever going to happen without your full knowledge and consent. We're family, Clara." "Don't," I said. She blinked. Tom made a small, involuntary movement that might have been the beginning of saying something. He didn't finish it. "Don't tell me we're family," I said. "You've called me that one in front of your friends and your church group for 3 years. You told a table full of people that your son feeds me and pays my bills, when I earn more than he does, and I own this house outright and have never asked anyone for a single cent. You've been asking questions about my property for 18 months, and 6 weeks ago you drafted a document to transfer my grandmother's house into your name, and you used your son to help you do it." I paused. My voice was completely level. "So no, we're not family. Family doesn't do this." Dorothy's face changed. The patience went first, then the smile, and what was underneath was something hard and unlovely, stripped of its wrapping. "That house should have come to Tom when you married him," she said. "She left it to you, a girl she barely knew." "She was my grandmother," I said. "She knew me for 34 years. Tom is her grandson-in-law. He has a right." "He has no legal right to this property," I said. "Neither do you. My attorney will be sending you a letter this week." That landed. I watched it land. Dorothy looked at Tom. Tom was looking at his shoes. She looked back at me, and something moved through her expression. Genuine anger, pure and undisguised, the first real thing I had seen on her face in years. "After everything I have done for this family," she said. Her voice had lost its sweetness entirely. "After everything I have sacrificed—" "What did you sacrifice, Dorothy?" She stood up. She was smaller than she looked when she was performing generosity. "This isn't over," she said. "I think it is," I said. "I think you should go." She went. Tom did not go with her. He stood in the kitchen after the door closed and looked at me, his face doing something complicated that I did not have the energy to decode. "I'm sorry," he said. I looked at him for a long moment. I thought about the 7 years. I thought about the document on the laptop. I thought about what Patricia Voss had said when I asked whether Tom could have helped draft those forms without understanding their purpose. "Clara, those forms are not ambiguous. Anyone who helped prepare them knew exactly what they were for." "You're sorry," I said. He nodded. "That's not enough right now," I said. "I know," he said. "I know that. I've been keeping the peace for 7 years, Tom. I kept it so hard that I almost kept myself right out of my own house." He didn't look at the table. He looked at me. That was different. Patricia Voss's letter went to Dorothy 12 days later. It was comprehensive and unambiguous. The property was titled solely in my name. Any document purporting to transfer that title without my authenticated signature was legally void, and any further attempt to pursue such a transfer would be met with legal action, including a complaint for fraud. Dorothy called Tom 3 times after receiving it. On the 3rd call, he said, "Mom, I can't keep doing this." And after a long silence, "I know. I should have said something sooner, and I didn't, and that's on me." Tom and I began counseling the following week. I had suggested it, and he agreed with a speed that told me he had been waiting to be asked. We talked, more honestly than we had in years, about his mother and his need to keep the peace and the price he had asked me to pay to maintain it. I had not yet decided what to do with all of it. I was still deciding. That felt like its own kind of progress. Spring came to Aldermore Street the way it always does. Abrupt and generous, the garden going from bare to extravagant in what felt like a single weekend. I was sitting on the front steps with my coffee one morning, watching the first tulips push up through the beds my grandmother had planted, and I thought about Nora, about what she would have said about all of this. She had met Dorothy at the wedding, had smiled the smile of a woman filing information away, and had said to me afterward, "That one watches everything. Keep your paperwork in order." I had laughed at the time. I did not laugh now, but I felt, sitting in the April light with the tulips coming up and the coffee warm in my hands, something that was close enough to peace to be worth calling by that name. The house smelled like lemon soap and old wood, and something faintly floral I had never been able to name. It was still mine. That was the thing Dorothy had never understood. Not about the house, not about me, not about any of it. Some things do not transfer. Some things you can draft documents for and plan across 18 careful months for, and they still do not move. They stay exactly where they are, rooted in something older and more durable than any form a lawyer can prepare. The tulips came up. The garden bloomed. I sat on my grandmother's steps, and I drank my coffee, and I let the morning be enough.